Good evening, spooky spooks. Welcome to my February wrap-up video. My name is Jess. I put the J in JT Reads. Let's talk about some books. I read 10 books in February. 10. The shortest month of the year. 10 books. Am I okay? That's a question we do not need to be asking ourselves today. First up this month, I read Medusa by Rosie Hewlett. It was a library book, so I don't have the physical copy to show you, but I'm also glad I don't have the physical copy because this was a 3-star. It was really hard to rate. I think I mentioned this in a weekly reading vlog, but I enjoy Medusa's story as a whole, but this retelling was not great. In comparison to Jessie Burton's retelling, which I read in January, I really loved that retelling, whereas this one I felt, it felt as though a petulant child was talking at all times, and at the start I gave it the benefit of the doubt because, to be fair, Medusa was young, but then as she grew, that tone just continued, and I didn't get the strength from her or the resilience, the revenge that you get from other Medusa retellings, so I was a little bit disappointed, but hard to rate it badly because I love Medusa and her story. So it was a 3-star because it's a good read. It's quite short, so it was a quick, enjoyable enough read, but wouldn't pick it up again, wouldn't purchase it, and wouldn't really recommend it. There were other Medusa retellings I'd recommend over this one. So although it was a slightly rocky start to the month, I then did read A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher and rated it 5 stars. This was also a library read, but I will be buying the physical copy because I need this on my shelf. I loved it. Although it was a horror, it had this witty, dry humour to it, and it felt so relatable because the main character, I think, is 32 years old. So I too am a 32-year-old woman, and I just felt that I understood her feelings on some things, and the horror itself was very unsettling and a little claustrophobic in parts in a good way. The writing is really effective, and I think Kingfisher always blows it out of the park with her writing style. Her books always keep you on your toes, keep you off your game, so you never know where it's going to go and you're just desperate to get to the end to find out what happens. So really recommend this one. Another win from T. Kingfisher for me. Next up, I read Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, and this is a dual perspective novel in verse, so a very interesting format to read. For anyone who doesn't know what novel in verse means, it's written like poetry, but it's a novel in verse. And the story follows 2 young girls whose father passes away when the plane he is on crashes into the ocean, and the story follows them discovering that the other one exists. So they were unaware that they had a half-sister across the world, and it is a tale of sisterhood through grief, and it's just really beautifully written. I think because it is essentially poetry, every word matters in poetry, and so it is crafted so well. It's just a really lovely story to read, very heartwarming, very heartbreaking, and I highly recommend. This was a 5-star read for me. Next up, I read The Witches of Varda by Anya Bergman, and again, I rated this 5 stars. We had just a really good start to the month. I deeply loved this book, and I'm so excited to discover that Anya Bergman is releasing another novel, I think at the beginning of 2025. It isn't about witches, I think it's about an apothecary. I could be making that up, but either way, I will be pre-ordering it as soon as I can. I have saved it to my wish list, and I'm very excited to read more from her. I think I mentioned this in a previous vlog, but the story itself really highlights the way women can turn on each other, or equally, the way in which we can come together in solidarity, and women in solidarity, powerhouses. And this novel really highlights that. One of my favourite quotes from it was, I haven't tabbed it, which is really frustrating, I don't know why I didn't do that, but I have memorised it, locked away in the noggin, and the quote is, worse than the men are women who hunt each other. And I think that is so deeply profound. Even though this is set in 1662, that notion is still prevalent in modern times, and I think it is very interesting. So highly recommend this one. Next up, The Deepest Love of My Life is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. Book 2 in the Emily Wilde's... Ooh. I was going to say duology, but it's actually a trilogy. Coming in 2025, the 3rd book, I assume coming in 2025. I may just be spreading heinous lies, but I think it will come out in January 2025. I've just got a hunch, you know? Oh, I loved this so much. So first of all, I rated it 5 stars. But if anything, I think it was better than the first book because it had a bit more grit to it. The stakes were a little higher, so it was still cozy. But there were times when I was thinking, is this person going to die? Because I will lose my mind if this person dies. So stakes were high, but it didn't lose any of its cozy element. The descriptions are so lovely. Heather Fawcett does such a good job at describing woodland and creatures. I think that this would genuinely make such a good film. A trilogy of films. They would be cinematic masterpieces. We can but dream. It will be no surprise to you, but I absolutely recommend picking up this series if you haven't already. I think these will be my favourite books of the year. We shall see. So we did eventually come to a bad book this month. I read Before Your Memory Fades by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, and I rated this 2 stars. This is the third in the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series, and the first 2 books I did enjoy, but as I progressed through the series, I started enjoying them less and less. I think that the premise is so interesting. It's such a creative idea, but the execution has become a little boring. It's very samey. The first book was very good because it was a new idea. By the second book, nothing new had been done to the idea. And by the third book, I'm done. I won't be continuing the series. But the idea is so good that I'm just so disappointed it wasn't done better. And I don't know if it's a case of the translation making it quite dry, but the dialogue is a little clunky. It doesn't feel natural. And I just don't care about the characters. That's the problem for me. I'm not invested in any of the characters' tales, so whilst I think it could be heartwarming, my heart is cold. Next up, I read Near the Bone by Christina Henry, and I rated this 4 stars. I had a really good time reading this. I think it is described as a horror thriller. It says that nowhere on the book. I'm going to tell you it's described as a horror thriller, and I believe it with my soul, because whilst it was horrific in parts, it was thrilling in the way that you needed to keep turning pages to know what happens. It does say on the front, a true page turner, and oh, it is. It really is. I read it so quickly because I was just desperate to know what happened next. The story follows a woman called Mattie, and she lives in the woods, very isolated, with her husband, William, and a creature lurks in the woods. And this is like no creature anyone has ever seen before. It's bear-like, but much, much, much bigger than any bear anyone has ever seen. And it goes on a little killing spree where it... how to word this nicely? It will kill animals and dismantle them and put their organs in piles. So in its cave where it lives, it just has a pile of hearts, a pile of livers, a pile of skulls, for all different types of animals, and perhaps some humans. It then hangs the bodies up from the trees by their intestines. So it's definitely got the horror element, and Mattie's husband is extremely controlling, very, very violent. Massive trigger warnings for domestic violence and domestic abuse in this. He is intent on killing this beast, and I'm not going to spoil the ending, but he doesn't quite achieve his goal. And I have so many theories on this because I wonder whether the animal actually exists. Nobody ever sees it, and I wonder if maybe it's a symbol of Mattie's strength and her will. It says something along the lines of, Mattie didn't need to see it to know that it was there, and I wonder if after so many years of being beaten down mentally and physically, her will is hidden, but she knows it's still there, and her husband is frightened of the beast. Is he also frightened of Mattie's strength? Does he know what she's capable of when she is at full capacity? I realise I've given a few spoilers, but I'm not going to spoil the ending because there is a very good twist. Very thrilling twist, very horrific twist. However, one thing is left unanswered. Lies. 2 things are left unanswered. First of all, what is the beast? Nobody actually ever sees it. Mattie sees the shape of it. We see the aftermath of the destruction it causes. We see claws. We see eyes in the darkness, but we never actually see the creature. So my questions are, does it exist? What is it if it does? And what happens to it after the story is ended? None of those things are answered in this story, and that's fine. I quite like that suspense and mystery. However, throughout the entire book, we mention a sister. Mattie had a sister called Heather. And she is so intent on finding out what happened to her sister Heather. And we never find out. Where the fluff is Heather? Is Heather alive? Does she exist? Is she a figment of Mattie's imagination that she created because she needed comfort? That would track. But her husband also mentions a sister at some point. So I feel like she does exist, but we never ever find out what happens to her. So spoiler alert, but that question is left seriously unanswered. And it's not like the book has been left open for a sequel. It doesn't feel like that anyway. But I just really need to know. This is one question that I need answered. I need to know what happens to Heather. Please and thank you. Next up, I read We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. And I rated this one 3 stars. So I think I may have rated this a little bit harshly because I also rated The Haunting of Hill House 3 stars. And I did enjoy it. Obviously, 3 stars is a good rating. But I didn't love it. I think if I was being extremely fair and extremely critical, this one would maybe be a 3.5 stars. Or The Haunting of Hill House should have been 2.5 rounded up, because I didn't enjoy them equally to give them the same rating. The Haunting of Hill House was good, and I'm glad I read it, but I didn't like any of the dialogue. I found it really unrealistic, and I didn't like that the men kept trying to jump in to save the women. In We Have Always Lived in the Castle, the women save themselves. And I loved that part of it. So the story follows a family that live in a castle. They've always lived there. Funny that, isn't it? And there is lore about them that certain family members have died in suspicious circumstances. And the older sister was a suspect. We're led to believe that the family members that died were poisoned in the sugar bowl. I think it's the sugar bowl. Yeah. And so they had their tea, they put sugar in their tea, and bleh, they died. And we don't know what happened to them, who killed them, because the sister doesn't admit it. Spoiler alert. The younger sister did it. I did not see that coming. I assumed that although she was denying it, the older sister had killed them. But it was the little girl. The little girl poisoned her family members. So absolutely fantastic plot twist. Great storyline. But we don't ever know why. We never find out why she did this. And I find that so sad. I really wanted to know. I wanted there to be some big horror that happened, and she was like, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. Goodbye, father. And it's kind of fine. I think if I had found out why, this would have been a 4-star, because I just really enjoyed the read. I was always looking forward to picking it up. I loved the sisters' relationship. I loved the little girl's attitude to everything. There was a cat in it. The cat was really sweet. The friendship between the little girl and the cat was lovely. But there were just some questions that were left unanswered that I wanted answered. But it's got kind of a whimsical happy ending in that there's a big fire and the house is partly destroyed. The last remaining family member living in the house with them was the uncle, and he passed away before the fire. I think they said he had a heart attack, but I'm not convinced. I think the little girl killed him too, but that's just my theory. And the girls move back into their half-ruined house and just live there peacefully. They're like a couple of witches in that the children of the village come up to the house and they're like, oh, I dare you to go to the door. And they're like, no, I can't. The sisters are in there. And I just love that. I love that they are feared. And they just sit in their castle, in their clothes made of tablecloths, just growing things in the garden, eating what they have. And the villagers are terrified of them. I love that for them. I'm now thinking this should have been 3.5 stars, but what's done is done. Next up, I read graphic novel A Guest in the House by Emily Carroll. I read last year Through the Woods by Emily Carroll and loved it so much. I think it might have been the first graphic novel I picked up, but it made me want to keep on reading horror graphic novels because they're amazing. The artwork in this is stunning. So creepy. I mean, look at this spooky little so-and-so. She's horrible. So the story follows a woman who marries a dentist who already has a child, and they move into quite a remote location. I think it's a little cabin on the lake, and they'll move in there together. And the woman starts seeing some paranormal activity around the house and the lake. And she is led to believe that the ghost she is seeing is her husband's previous wife. And I'm not going to spoil the plot twist for you, but it isn't the wife. That's all I want to say, I think, on the plot. Because I didn't see the twist coming. Unfortunately, I think the twist made it less horrifying, but more mysterious. However, the first 75% of this was horrible, and disturbing and gross and amazing. So I did rate this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. Such a page turner, and I can't wait to pick up anything else by Emily Carroll that she happens to write or draw, because I'm a big fan. Lastly, in February, I read My Throat an Open Grave by Tori Bovalino, and I rated this 3 stars. And let me tell you for why, because it was a very good book and I would recommend it. I would highly recommend it, in fact. But this was described as a horror, and whilst I think there were some horror aspects to it, there is paranormal activity, there are ghosts in it, but it's not scary at all. It is more of a dark romance, I would say, and if you're rating it as a dark romance, well, this is a 5 star, but I'm rating it as a horror, which it is described as, and then it's only a 3 star. Do you see what I mean? I think this is perfect for fans of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. It has a very similar sort of storyline to it, in that the main character falls in love with, I think she falls in love with a dark fae prince. So quite a similar aspect to Addie LaRue obviously falling in love with death itself. So did she fall in love with death itself? Yeah. Yeah, maybe. So this dark fae prince is a forest-dwelling entity that the villagers are terrified of because he steals babies. He just creeps into their house at night, plucks children out of their homes and takes them into the forest. And once he's done that, a villager, usually the mother of the baby, is sent into the woods to try and retrieve their babies, and they never return. So people are just going missing left, right and centre in this village. And eventually our main character, she's at home babysitting her little brother. He's a baby, and yeah, as you would expect, he gets plucked out of his crib where he's sleeping and stolen into the woods. And so the villagers are like, okay Leah, go get your baby brother. And she's like, okay fine, if I have to. I mean, I don't really care, take him away, but okay, if I must. She's very blasé about the fact that her baby brother has been stolen by a monster. And so she goes into the woods and she meets this fae prince. And immediately she's like, well, okay, you're a bit of me. And she falls in love with him. The fae prince gives her a task and says, if you do this thing well, then you can have your baby brother back. And so she stays there for a while perfecting this task she has to give. I don't want to give too many details on it. And she starts thinking, okay, like you've stolen my baby brother, but I'm actually thinking you're not a bad person, and I'm actually quite liking it here. And then the whole kind of tone changed, and I was like, this is amazing, because it's so comfy. It's comfy, cozy forest community living. Everyone there has a job to keep the community sustainable, and it's just really an enjoyable read. Like, I would love a sequel where there's no horror aspect and we just focus on her life in the woods. I would love that. There is a good plot twist that I did not see coming at all, and it was really effective. Really enjoyed it. I won't spoil it, obviously. But then there was a point towards the end of the book, I think I was nearing 15 pages left, and she had gone back to her hometown. She has her baby brother. She's gone back home. She's gone to school. She's thinking about applying for colleges. And I was so disappointed. It was going to end up being a 2-star because I was just so disappointed. I was like, why did we go through all of this journey for you to just go back home and go to college? That's not what I'm here for. Forget about college. Go live in the woods with all of your found family and your fae prince. Go be happy. Why would you want to go to college? Go live in the woods. I would always choose woods over college. And then, as you can expect, in the last few pages, she did return. So I think my rating may seem harsh because I really, really did enjoy this, but I don't think it should be described as a horror, because the only horror part was, okay, at the start when you didn't know who the fae prince was, it was a little sinister that a forest-dwelling beast was stealing babies, and there are ghosts in it, but she befriends the ghosts. The ghosts are just girls who have lost their lives trying to find their babies, and that's a very big plot point that is explained in the book. It just wasn't horror. But as a dark romance, 5 stars. I would recommend it anyway. For fans of Addie LaRue especially, I think you would love this. And that is February. 10 whole books I read in February. As always, if you have any horror recommendations, if you have any fae romance recommendations, that's now our thing, please drop them in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, if you're enjoying the content I put out, and I hope to see you in a video very, very soon. Bye!